Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
We are so excited to have this conversation, not just about adoption, because we feel like that's a really important conversation to have, but also because it's with the two of you. And we just have been so excited to sit down with you both. You are two of our longest term coworkers and two people we trust so much in the world. And I would say in this area in particular, but really in all areas. Thank you for being with us.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're
thank
so
you so
excited.
much.
Okay, and I have to start off with my favorite story that I don't even know if I've ever told y'all. Favorite story of a family who they actually adopted two girls, but a conversation we had. So I was counseling this girl who was an adolescent, precious, just so neat, thoughtful. I mean, this was at least a decade ago. And she was struggling with depression, and it became severe enough that I felt like it was time to start the conversation about medication. And so I brought her mom up for the three of us to sit down together, and her mom sat down. She had the kindest look on her face, and she put her hand on her daughter's leg, and her daughter was crying and said, "Mom, I just am really struggling, and I feel like it's not getting better. I'm not getting any moments where I feel okay, and I'm sad all the time." And Sissy and I both feel like maybe we need to talk about getting me on medicine. And her mom looked at her and she said, "Honey, I totally get it. I'm so sorry you feel this way. And you know, depression runs in our family." And she said, "Mom, I was adopted." And her mom said, "I always forget." Isn't that the sweetest?
Yeah, it's so
And
sweet.
feels like such a picture of the families that we see so often in the hope that's there. So, okay, so
I love that story.
I know.
That is
That's
a
a great
perfect
story.
introduction to our conversation with these dear folks.
And happens all the time.
I
Yeah,
know.
all the time.
So
Yeah.
great. Well, you two, will you just start out by telling us a little bit about the populations you work the most with?
Sure, Emma, you go first. Ladies first.
Okay. I mean, I would say if I had to put it into a nutshell, it would probably be mainly teens, early college age, and they're usually ones that don't always want to be here, aren't super keen on coming to counseling, really hate talking about feelings, strong-willed. I like to, determined. Let's put it in and challenging. And I like that. They're fierce and they are spunky, and I love that. They have a fire. And I think I relate to it a lot. That's kind of how I was growing up and still am. But also, I think I also love it because you get to watch this really spunky, challenging person kind of soften, but they don't have to lose their fire in the process. And so I think that's my favorite thing, because and that's what I always tell parents at the beginning. I'm like, I don't want to squelch their fire. It's such a cool thing, especially for girls, it's a cool trait for them to have, and it will serve them well.
Yes.
In life, I was like, but there's a way to use it. There's a way to hone it. There's a way to balance it. There's some self-awareness that comes with, having that part of who they are. So I think, that's that's who I normally see is, kind of that type of person. So I love it.
And I'm going to jump in and say, for those of you who are listening, when I meet with families the first time, that it is pretty quickly clear that they're an Emma person, an Emma client. I think what is such a gift about you, Emma, and those of you who are listening, if you have a strong-willed child, I want you to find a counselor. You're not going to find a counselor like Emma, but one who's close, because you have so much warmth.
Oh, thank
and
you.
you're so playful and you're so direct. And for kids who are fiery and spicy like that, they need somebody who's going to be super relational and disarm them with that part of who they are, and then can speak directly to them. Because I carry all the intensity that we know lives in a perfectionist. And so I think I go toe to toe with those kids in a way that's not as helpful. And you just do a beautiful job of
thank you.
giving, of earning their trust where they want to hear your voice. And I'm so grateful for you in this space because of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's very true.
And I want to just add, speaking of spicy and strong-willed, that June, my 13-week-old puppy, is in the room right now. Who's the spiciest puppy
Bring
I've
her-
ever met.
bring her
And
on.
So, yeah, I may put
Emma's
her on
got
the
her.
couch next to you in a few minutes, Emma. But if you hear yelping and wrangling in the background, that's me.
She's doing great.
Mhm.
She is. She is.
Mhm.
She
And
is.
she's so cute.
She
You
is
need to
so
hop
cute.
on YouTube so you can see how cute June is as we're having this conversation.
She is a good-looking pup. So I guess kind of I could share a little bit about who I see.
Yes.
I would say in a nutshell, I'm kind of a male version of Emma as far as my demographic.
True. Yeah.
A lot of who I see are kind of strong-willed boys. I'd say about a third of my caseload are pretty tough, challenging boys. And then I also do a lot of kind of high, I don't know how to describe it. Tough divorce situations, high conflict, high intensity. Do a lot of those. I also do some sports performance stuff. And then I also do kind of just young adults. I like kind of 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Boys that are having a tough time, about to graduate, not sure what I'm going to do, not sure where I'm going to go. Do I need to stay at home? Do I need to leave and go? Do a lot of that. And so I like a lot of that too. So yeah, that's pretty much who I see.
Well, and you have the same warmth and directness. And I was across the hall from you for a long time. We were neighbors in offices. And I think that families you counsel wanted you to come to their Thanksgiving dinners every time. I just feel like families want to adopt you because they feel so loved and supported. And for a man who carries a lot of strength, you bring such tenderness to the equation too in a really beautiful way, David,
Thanks.
that I love.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Well, it's very true. Okay. So let's jump in with, we would love to hear, both of you, actually, we all say how long you've been doing this as you answer this question.
Sure.
But want to hear something that you would say is your favorite part of working with kids or something you have learned from a child recently of any age.
You can go first.
Okay. All right. So I, David, Denton, have been at Daystar 17 years.
Wow.
Started in 2006. So almost 18. So I started November 1st in 2006. So right about the time we were moving into our beautiful new facility here, our building. And then before that, for a smidge, I was in private practice before I came here. And then before that, I was a youth pastor for 9 years. So I've been working with teens since 1996 when I graduated UT Knoxville. So
Sorry about the game.
your team is really good.
The Razorbacks just beat the
You got
Vols,
us.
but
You got us good.
We're
You have a
still
good
really good friends. We still love
Yes,
each other.
we are.
Yes.
We texted that night and said, good job. So 1996. So how many ever years that is? My math is terrible. Is that 28 years, I guess, total?
Amazing, Dave.
So between youth ministry years, then private practice, and then here. So that's how long I've been working with kids. I think my favorite part is their energy. It keeps me young. I like to still think of myself as a 22, 24-year-old person at heart, even though I probably shouldn't go wakeboarding anymore or anything like that. I'd probably end up with some injuries or play softball. Probably a bad idea. But so yeah, they keep me young. I like the relevance of teens and young adults, just kind of being on the pulse of what's going on in their community and their age, and it just kind of keeps me in the know of kind of what their struggles are and kind of keeps me in touch with them. And I just want to stay in touch with them. So that's a big part of it. It's just the youthful energy, the relevance, all that. It just kind of invigorates me. So
I'm Emma Soechting. I've been here 13 years. It'll be
Wow.
14 next year. So I'm like 13 and a half, I guess, if you want to get really technical about it. And then what I love about working with kids and teens, there's so many things. I would say like it's always different.
Yeah.
I love having a challenge. So I do think part of it is just like, and walking alongside a lot of the, girls that I work with and being able to just hold space for them. And I think that's really hard to find, especially right now, for them to just have a space where they can come and they have someone who's like listening and hearing them out. But yeah, I think one of my favorite parts is maybe the problem solving aspect and just the challenge of it all. But then also just watching someone grow and like figure things out and having aha moments. And it usually has not a whole lot to do with me. I mean, I'm there for it, but it's so cool to watch and just being able to make or help make someone's life a little bit better. And helping them deal with problems in a healthier way. So I think, it's just, again, it's the problem solving aspect and the connection. I just love connecting with people.
Okay, you two, you have both done a deep dive in the area of adoption. Both of you studied under Dr. Karen Purvis when she was living and other thought leaders in this field. And we would love to just ask you, what do you see as particular areas of struggle for kids who've been adopted, and what can parents do to help? Y'all may not know this, but it costs a lot of money to put a podcast together. We've got an incredible team around us that we are so proud of and grateful for, and thankful for amazing sponsors like the ones coming up who help support that work.
We just got through talking with our management team about needing some updated photos.
Let's be transparent. It's because in the one hanging on the wall, I look like your great-grandfather and you are dropping me off at assisted living.
We might both look a smidge older than we'd prefer. And I have a new secret weapon before the next photo shoot. I've been looking for a skincare product that can effectively combat aging and wrinkles and help restore the appearance of youth to my skin. I've tried 10 to 15 products over the years and nothing has worked. Nor have I felt I can trust the quality of the products out there. Until now. Purity Wood's mission is to provide people with the cleanest and most effective healthy, aging, and longevity products available.
All of their products are USDA certified organic, non-GMO, free of anything artificial, free of toxic preservatives and synthetic additives like pesticides, chemical fertilizers and dyes, parabens, and of course it's cruelty-free and never tested on animals. Did you hear that, June and Patches? Your animal friends are safe.
Purity Woods products leverage the wonders of a revolutionary ingredient, maple leaf extract. Maple leaves contain anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, and hydrating properties, which can help soothe irritated or inflamed skin while also plumping, brightening, and nourishing it.
I could use some plumping, brightening, and nourishing.
Their age-defying Dream Cream is a game changer. It will make you look and feel like you've jumped back years in time. Its powerful formula contains revolutionary maple leaf extracts, plus over 25 unique and potent ingredients that help eliminate fine lines, wrinkles, age spots, and uneven skin tone.
I have all those. It was formulated by skincare chemists at the top of their field to create a product that supports collagen and elastin production without irritation, drying of the skin, or hormone disruption.
Thank goodness for that. Turn back time on the appearance of your skin with Purity Woods Age-Defying Dream Cream. Purity Woods is currently offering 17% off site-wide, but we have an additional 10% discount for our listeners for a total savings of 27%.
Go to puritywoods.com/RBG or enter code RBG at checkout for an additional 10% off your first order. That's puritywoods.com and enter code RBG for a total of 27% off your first order.
So first, I would say my background with Karen, she was a rock star. She was an amazing, amazing person. So strong, so intelligent. Enjoyed my time there. It was, I think, 6-7 days, but it felt like 2 days. It went by so fast. Took in so much information from her. I fully believe if she were still around, she would still be evolving and learning what some of the other theorists have kind of figured out now. So I still do use some of my training under her, but I do use a lot more of Heather Forbes' stuff now. And so I think where I've kind of settled into this is I think Karen's stuff is really, really good from kind of birth to 6 or 7. The early formation stuff, a lot of holds, touches, reassuring touches, stroking the hair, time ins versus time outs, things like that. It's super applicable. It's just hard to have a time in with a 13-year-old who doesn't want to spend time with you. Right? It's hard to sit a 12-year-old in your lap and say, let me brush your hair, sweetie. Right? And so what happens is I find that the younger the clientele comes in, the more Purvis work I do. The older the clientele come in, the more Forbes work I do. So I would say, to answer your question, I use the Purvis stuff a lot, but it depends on their age. And a lot of what I see is impulsivity, lying, lack of eye contact, a lot of amygdala stuff. And we can get into that later if we need to get into more amygdala brain stuff. But that's a lot of what I'm seeing with them. And that's kind of who I use.
Yeah.
Purvis for younger, Forbes for older.
And if you're not as familiar with the amygdala, that's the fight or flight or sometimes freeze region of the brain.
Absolutely. They say it's the oldest part of the brain. They call it the reptilian brain. They call it the lower part of the brain or the basement of the brain. And it's little almond-shaped clusters way deep in there, and it's our fight or flight.
Yes.
And just due to these sweet little kids' tough upbringings, a lot of times it gets triggered early on in development, which then causes some neurodeficits, some delays as they age. So sometimes they're just not quite age appropriate in some of their functioning because that amygdala has been firing so much so early.
That's a great explanation. Thank you.
I think what I see a lot is, especially when they reach, middle school, high school, is probably identity. I think the hard part about adoption, or what I've seen, is each story is so different. And so, each family has their own individualized hard spots. I think too, when they reach teenage and, I think they're like, what is this? Is this adoption? Is this being a teenager? Is this being is this developmentally just where they're at? And so, I think a lot of times for families, that's the hard part, is just kind of figuring out what's adoption, what's just normal, and then for my girls, it's a whole lot of just identity, feeling because I think it's a hard thing to try to process with your parents, because especially for my girls who don't want to hurt feelings or don't, so there's a lot of that. And do they know their story or do they not? I think, because middle school and high school, that's when they start asking all these questions, and even in classroom settings where it's what's your genetic background? And that can be really tough, and, having to do a family tree.
Yeah.
So just, and also kids ask strange questions and say weird things. And so, I think it's just having to process feeling different, and you already feel so awkward or kind of strange when you enter into middle school, and then there's this whole other piece to it. And so again, I think it's just figuring out identity, who they are, where they want to kind of fall, how much do they want to know. They start asking a lot more questions. Can they ask these questions? So I feel like it just gets it feels a lot more complicated as they get into middle school, high school, than just straight up attachment.
What do you all see as a particular area of struggle for parents?
I mean, I think that's hard because I think parenting is so hard in general. And I think sometimes, they struggle with guilt, or somehow they've done something, they've messed up. But I think every parent experiences that, adoption or not. And so I think the struggle is that somehow they've completely, messed up, and this is why they're here. And it's no.
Yeah.
This is just I think that's the struggle, is realizing you've done the best you could, just like all of us.
Yes.
And so I think that is where I think parents kind of get in their head. I think that, and then I also think it's hard. And again, I think this would apply to parents of adoption or not, but I think it's dealing with expectations versus maybe what is actually happening. And so I think there's also some grieving that sometimes has to happen. And I think that's also a struggle of having all these expectations for what this was going to look like, and it doesn't look that way.
Yes.
And so that's what I find too, of being like us having to kind of like work through letting some of that go, and grieving that, and then being open to what it is, you know? And so I think that's a huge one.
That's where I'm so grateful for the two of you and for Karen Purvis and all the other folks who are out there talking about this. Because I remember years ago, a mom here who had several kids she had adopted saying, love is not enough. And I thought it was going to be. And so to lean in with expectation and training on attachment, and then what we do as they get older, it just feels like it's so important. So just grateful for you. What would you add, David?
I would say just a high percentage of my families that I see that are adoptive, I would say probably 75 to 80% of these families, the first session, as I'm starting to educate them on some of what they're dealing with, one of the first things I have to do with them is free them up from guilt and shame. So that tends to be one of the very first parts of the process, because they come in not knowing what all's going on inside their child. So therefore, they think they have more causality with the parenting than they do.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I have to tell them is, hey, a lot of what's going on, you had nothing to do with. This stuff was going on inside and you didn't even know it. And a lot of it, you didn't even cause it. A lot of it happened before you even started attaching.
Yeah, which is what you were saying about their upbringing earlier. Yeah,
exactly. Well, and it also ties in what you said, the very, very first story about forgetting the child was adopted. A lot of the parents will tell me, I just wish they had green skin, or I just wish they had, some identifier that let me know, like, oh yeah, I've got to reset, and not compare them to when I was growing up with my sibling or my others that I've raised who are biological. Right? And they just wish they had some kind of identifier to continually to remind them, like, slow down, correct expectations, don't blame self, don't blame them, work through it. And so that's a lot of what I do on the front end is shame, guilt stuff, freeing them up from that. And you'd be surprised how many people come in with that.
We'd love to ask you both, what are some of your favorite resources for parents?
So I would just speak back to what I said a little bit earlier about the Heather Forbes stuff. So she's written a couple just really bestseller books. One is called Beyond Consequences, Logic and Control. And what I tell parents is this one is usually kind of how to raise them, and this one's about how to educate them. And this one's called Help for Billy.
Oh, that's great.
And what she basically talks about is it is trauma informed. A lot of it is, but a lot of it is amygdala based. And basically some of the stuff I really learned from her that I didn't know too much from Purvis is how much of the brain is distracted and unaccessible when the amygdala fires. Purvis didn't teach us much about that. She taught us about a lot of great other things, but through the Forbes stuff, I really figured out they can't access the rational part of the brain, and they can't access short-term memory. And so if this kid's amygdala is firing at school because they dropped their milk in the lunchroom, they may be completely unconnected an hour later when they take the science test.
Wow.
Or they may be having even small things, like all adoptive parents know, and you know this, Emma, change is a big deal for adoptives, right? It really gets them rattled, right? Even little things like having a substitute teacher or an unannounced fire drill, they could be completely unconnected the rest of the day. So if they have a substitute teacher in one class, but then in the next class they don't, but they take a quiz, they may, in the rational part, the short-term memory part, know enough to make an 85 or a 90, but if they can't access that, they make a 55. Well, then their parents get frustrated. I stayed up with you and studied for 2 hours the night before and you made a 55. I know you know more than that. And the parents don't know that anything along the way could have triggered that amygdala, and then they can't access short-term memory, which is exactly what we need for quizzes and tests, right?
Right.
And so that's the stuff I learned from Forbes that I didn't really learn from Purvis that I use all the time. It's just continuing to remind the parents that short-term memory, rational thought, they temporarily get hijacked. She describes it as being locked in a closet. It's still there. It's just locked in a closet temporarily.
That's so good. And then Karen Purvis wrote The Connected Child.
Yes, great book.
And then you have two friends that you love their work.
Yes, The Adoption Connection. We did a great interview. We'll link to that episode in our show notes. Thank you. And that follow-up book was written by Dr. Karen Purvis and Lisa Qualls called The Connected Parent. And she and Melissa Corkum started a great resource for fostering and adoptive parents that is just endless resources if you go to the Adoption Connection online.
Yeah, and let me say one more thing about Purvis, how great it is. I don't want it to sound like I'm not. I'm very much for it, and I tell my parents that's the first thing I want them to read.
Yeah,
is that. Then get to this stuff. I believe that is the foundation for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's great.
Yeah, and I don't know if this would necessarily be a resource, but I think it is. I tell them something that might feel, because some of them are like, I understand like books sometimes can be like, when am I gonna read that?
Yes.
Like it can feel overwhelming. And so I do encourage them to try to find other people who have adopted and maybe are somewhat on the other side that they can kind of connect with, because I think nothing feels better when you're in the storm than talking to someone and being like, this is how I feel right now. And it's really honest and vulnerable, and someone going, oh yeah, I've been there. I totally understand. And maybe even here's what we did that actually helped. Here's, so I was like, you need to try to find some people that you can connect with that are either walking through some of the same stuff with you as far as adoption goes, or who are on the other side of it. Especially those who kind of feel isolated or that no one really understands like what they're going through. They don't know it. They don't have any friends who are adopted. I also was like, it would really probably help, your kids who are adopted to get to be around other adopted children or teens, and so just to be able to have people who also kind of maybe understand their feelings. And so, again, it's not necessarily a resource, but I do think it's something that is so helpful to be able to hear from people and have a community that understands from a personal level.
That's a great reminder.
Yes.
And speaking of resources, y'all also do parent consults over Zoom.
Yes, I'm totally
Or
happy to do
adoption and
that.
other things.
And,
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can call Daystar, hop on our website, to have a Zoom conversation with either one of them.
Yes.
Not your kids. We can't do that over Zoom, sadly, but we can work with you as parents. What would you all say you want all parents who are considering adoption to know?
In a perfect world, I wish every adopted parent would get like a pre-adoption consult with somebody in kind of the therapy world, right? Obviously, all of the adoption agencies that I've worked with parents are great agencies. They're great people. They love people. They're big-hearted. They're wonderful. They're just not quite trained in some of the areas we're trained, and we all need each other. We all have different specialties. I can't do what they do.
Right.
There's no way. My patience would run out. My heart would run dry. I would be exhausted. And so I can't do what they do. And so we all need each other. And so I wish there was a way we could get the word out more so they could get more educated on the front end. So that would be my answer to that, is I wish they could know a little bit more about how to start preparing. Because there is sometimes I've seen some high rates of success when parents come in earlier and work on their own stuff before they start to adopt, right? Or to foster. Like what might trigger me already? What might, from my upbringing, and Forbes does talk a lot about that in here. She calls it the patterns that bind us, negative feedback loops. And a lot of it's based off how we were parented and our expectations when we go into parenting. And so that's a big piece in this too. And that's usually what I do with the parents the first session or two. And some of my work with the parents is just go through any past stuff that might alter their expectations. So it's really kind of front end stuff can really save you going down the long road if you do that on the front end.
I guess it depends on if they have kids in the house already or not. Because I've also worked with kids whose parents have adopted and they're biological. And I think without, parents don't think about it, but without even having, not that kids get to decide big decisions, but just to have a voice in your family is going to drastically change the dynamics. And so I think a lot of them feel like I was never really asked nor talked to, just about like how this would make me feel or how I feel about things. And I think just considering also like your family unit as a whole, what are we already having a hard time with? Where do we already have struggles with? Considering personalities, age, like will we adopt out of birth order? Because that will change the entire dynamic of everyone in the family. It's going to change where they land in the family unit. And so I think because that's going to make it more challenging. If so I think it's just a lot to consider when you already have other kids in the house. And so I think that's a huge one that I think a lot of people, and talking to parents who have done that, I think they're like, I wish we would have just been a lot more proactive, a lot more thoughtful, had a lot more conversations as a family, and come, into sessions like with a therapist and just been a lot more proactive on the the beginning.
Yes.
Than waiting till we've already gotten this kid in our house or this baby or whatever, and been like, oh, well, now we need to start the process. And I do think too, like everyone needs to be in counseling, like when that happens and before that happens, because I think sometimes, again, it's like the kid, whoever, the adopted kid can come in and get counseling, but then all the other kids are like, I kind of need that too.
Yes.
So I think I'm with David too on all of that, is the preventative, like the, and I think asking other families who've been through it advice.
Well,
I just
wish
think
they had known.
Oh man, wish you had known. Like just being so like doing tons of like, I don't know, meetups with other families and just kind of like being like, be super honest with me.
Yes.
About all of it and things that you wish you would have done different, things you wish you would have known. So, and again, just being really thoughtful about the whole process.
Thank you. What would you both say are a few ideas that can help set up a strong attachment between a parent and a child?
I can't believe we just finished our last speaking engagement of 2024. And what a way to finish in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and getting to go to a Razorback game.
Tell everyone what you had folks do in the last 5 minutes of the time.
We called the Hogs. We've had so much speaking this year that we both lost our voices at different points. But who saved us?
Monocora, our new favorite sponsor. I took the travel packs to Arkansas with me.
The best way to use Monocora is straight from the spoon first thing in the morning, letting the creamy texture melt in your mouth and coat your throat.
Monocora honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. It's a game changer, and all you need is 1 heat teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Monica.
It's a honey with superpowers. Right now is the best time to try Monocora honey. They're running their biggest sale of the year through December 2nd.
Head to monocora.com/RBG to get $150 off your first order of their Black Friday starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Monica honey jar, 35 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook.
That's manukora.com/RBG for $150 off your first starter kit.
My initial reaction to that question is like you would with any kid. I think I understand that stories are different. There can be trauma involved. I do get that. But like sometimes I think as parents and adults, we can overcomplicate connection and connecting to a kid. And honestly, like having my own kids too is put it even more into light, but they just want your time. They just want your time. They just want your attention. And so clearing out space and like super present, right? Not just in the same room, not when you're distracted. It's like very intentional time. And I understand you can't do that all the time, right? We're adults. We have to do things. But I do think like that is always my like gut feeling my initial reaction is like, honestly, it's across the board how you would attach to any kid.
Okay. I would say specifically for this clientele, I would say, back to the amygdala stuff, right? They've got this heightened amygdala, heightened fight or flight. I tell parents a lot of times they see the world through the lenses, almost like putting on colored glasses, right? They see the world through the lenses of fear or threat. That's kind of how they view the world. It's fear and threat avoidance, right? So when your question is back to attachment, how do you attach with a kid? Now that we know they see the world through fear or threat, you make it as less threatening as possible, right? So one of the biggest homeworks I give parents a lot is to allow their adoptive child choices as often as they can. Not so much the kid's ruling the roost, not so much the kid has all the power. That's not the goal. But when you can allocate for things like, hey, I made spaghetti tonight, we're all having spaghetti, but you could also have PB&J if the spaghetti's not for you, and here's how to make it yourself and things like that. So we're not waiting on them hand and foot like a servant, right? But we are just giving them some choices, because what happens is usually these kids get triggered when they feel painted into a corner. We're having this now, and no ifs, ands, or buts. And that usually tends to be one of the first things that does trigger these kids a lot. Is like, we didn't know this was coming. Now it's coming this way and coming like this. And then what happens is the anxiety in them just gets built up. You can see it. You can see the kind of gripping the armrest, the white knuckling, the wherever they're, touching. And so whenever you can give them choices, I've found that's so much better. Even little things, choices in what they wear to church. Is it really what you want them to wear? No, it maybe has a little fray on the bottom of the jeans. It's not the nice, fancy stuff, but giving them the choice of you can wear this or this.
Yeah.
Right? And so the attachment really grows because the amygdala calms. And as amygdala calms, then they can get more into other parts of the brain, attachment, emotional things that are positive, not negative, fear-based parts.
Yes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fostering and what advice you would give to parents who are fostering, knowing they potentially have a short window of time. What can they do for kids to create strong attachments and emotional health for these kids as a family?
It's definitely like a harder, it's just a harder space. I grew up, we did foster when I was growing up, and then now I'm the youngest of 4. 2 of my siblings do foster care. So, I think about what they do. And I think one of the things they do is like, you've got to kind of like, again, take down your expectations.
Yes.
I think that can be one thing. Meeting them where they're at. And then also, like, again, you're just going to have to be in it with them, like where they're not going to sleep well. They're going to be up a lot. I think it's just knowing, like, I'm going to be with them during the night. Like, we're going to sit here. They're going to have big emotions. And I think it's just the biggest thing you can show them is in that short amount of time is I'm not going anywhere. Even when you're really hard, or even when, and I do know that it can be a really tough space to be in. And I guess it also depends on the foster care you're doing. Like, is it just like, while bio mom's getting back on her feet? So you're also having to kind of like be the in-between there. But I think that's like probably, it's just going to be a lot more simplified, and taking expectations way down, and not trying to do too many things. You're probably going to have to change your schedules quite a bit. And also just not trying to throw a whole lot of things at this kid to get them into a good place or like a healthy place, or, in a short amount of time. It's just probably not going to happen as fast as you would want it to. So I think it's just, again, kind of completely changing, the way that you are hoping things will go. Having no expectations if you can. So, yeah.
I would say for me, and I'll preface this with, I don't see nearly as many foster situations as I do adoptive, but the ones that I do, one of the kind of recurrent themes we talk about a lot is even shooting for neutral interactions instead of negative interactions. And a worse way of saying that would be damage control, right?
Yeah.
But teaching the parent that if at the end of the day you had a neutral interaction with a very damaged young child who's had multiple caregivers, whose amygdala is firing all the time, who's easily triggered, right? If you can just get through that day without any triggerings, right? You kind of won. And you probably worked your tail off to get there. And so just teaching them that just to shoot for those neutral, obviously we want positive. We want warm, fuzzy, huggy, cuddling at night, prayers before bed, right? We want that. But sometimes if we can just shoot for neutral instead of negative interactions, we've done our part for that day. So that kind of piggybacks on what Emma's saying about expectation. But yeah, it would be just trying to get through, bridge the gap for this kid until we get that permanent situation.
It's so good, y'all.
Just in general, what do you both believe kids need the most from parents today?
This particular clientele is predictability, regimented schedules. I say systems. When parents say, well, David, how do you do this? I say, let's put systems in place. Let's get a predictable schedule even in the summer. Let's tell the child ahead of time, you've got this week of soccer camp, you've got this week of scouts camp, and they know ahead of time, right? So this particular clientele, I would say predictability, schedule, things like that. I'd say for kids in general, what the trend I'm seeing lately is they're so darn busy and they're so overscheduled. And so I'm starting to pick up on a lot of child adolescent anxiety. It's leaking over to schoolwork, sports work, and everything. And I think they've just got a lot on their plate. So anytime a parent can simplify and go, you know what? I'm starting to notice Jimmy doesn't like the drums much anymore. We're going to not do the drum lessons. We're going to switch and go with swimming because he's loving that. We're going to stay with guitar because he's loving that. But we're not going to do guitar, swimming, drums, xylophone, and accordion, right? And so, so just simplifying, I would say, for the broader population.
Yeah, I would say that maybe like not trying so hard, and I'll explain it, but I think a lot of times you start to feel panicky if you're not connecting with your kid, or in the way that maybe you had imagined it was going to look like. And then I think that's when like a lot of like hovering, or a lot of like what kids or teens would say is like a little smothering, or, and where they're just like, like I can't take a breath without someone asking me if I'm okay, or, those kind of things. And so I think one of the things that parents is just like take a step back, remind them that the door's open, and just being consistent in that. Like one of the examples I give parents with teens is like every night before bed, like, because, I think it's easier to connect with your kid when they're younger at bedtime. You go read stories, you tuck them in. Right. It's all this. And then I think then the connection gets lost and lost and lost. And so it's like every night before bed, go in there, bring them like sleepy time tea or something. Just really like they didn't ask for it. It's just, or something that they like, and just being like, hey, how's your day? And they can be like, fine, whatever. But, and you can be like, okay, well, I'm just down the hall if you need me. Yeah. And you do it every night. I was like, and it may take 6 months. But one night they're going to say, hey, actually, it's going to open this door. And so, I do think that that's one thing is, again, just taking a step back and maybe not letting our anxiety as parents take over to where we end up pushing kids away. So
I'm glad you said that. That reminds me too. I should have brought this up earlier. I would tell parents, never underestimate the power of meeting a physical need in these children. Because if you go back to the amygdala and all the stuff that's going on, when that thing fires, they go down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They go down to their basic level needs. So they're not worried about being a good student. They're not worried about being a good brother. They're worried about, am I fed? Do I have a roof, right? And so I'm glad you brought that up, because the power of meeting a physical need, when you said bring them the tea, that's what made me think of that. And so meeting that physical need is hugely important for a fostering parent, even more so than an adoptive parent. Just meeting that physical need. Yeah, reminding them we have food, here's some. Reminding them we have snacks, here's some. Big deal. Right. It's a big deal.
I love the idea. I love just the image of a parent walking in with the tea and saying, how was your day? And then if they don't give an answer, when you were talking about it, Emma, I was thinking about how so many teenagers will sit in our offices, probably all 4 of our offices, and say, oh, my mom asked so many questions, or my dad asked so many questions. I don't know that I've ever heard an adult say, man, I wish my mom hadn't asked me so much about my life. Or my dad hadn't.
Yep.
So hang in there if your kids are complaining about that now.
Exactly.
Yes. It's investment for the long term. So we talk so much about, and I feel certain y'all are seeing the same thing, that we have never felt like parents are as weary, as discouraged, feel as defeated as we have in the last couple of years. And would love to know just a last reminder y'all would each want to give weary parents.
I'll jump in there first real quick.
Good.
I would say over the years of doing this, thankfully, one of the benefits, well, there's many benefits to this job, but one of the biggest benefits of this job is seeing families grow old with me. People come back 10 years later, 15 years later, like
inviting you to their Thanksgiving table.
Thanks. And even helping kids that are now 25-year-olds navigate who they're dating that were once 12-year-olds in my office, right? And so just seeing that has been huge. But what I would say about a lot of these families is if you can just work on modeling your best, they're going to grow out of a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is going to pass in due time. If you're just working on modeling, right? Healthy conflict with your spouse, healthy dealing with a loss at a job or a demotion or money stress. If you can just do your best at modeling that, they're taking all that in. And then as they hit these developmental milestones, they're going to outgrow a lot of what you're seeing. So that would be one. Two, I would say, is just really take heart and try not to catastrophize or be, kind of fatalistic. Try not to assume that, because he's lying now at 8, he's going to be a criminal. Yes. He's going to be, right, a chronic liar at 25. And so I think just take heart that a lot of this stuff is going to kind of flush itself out. Just you do your daily stuff. You be the best you can be as far as a model for them. And a lot of this is going to work itself out.
Great. So good, David.
I think, I don't know, personally and also just in my office, I think something that's created more weariness, for parents is just the criticism of parenting that is out there right now. It's just abundant, right? Like everyone telling you, like, if you do this, you have ruined your child, or, if you, and it's just, or there's only one right way. And there's not. There's a lot of right ways. Or you're a human and you messed up and you just say sorry, and I think and maybe turn off all the social media and maybe unfollow. I'm just there. Yeah. You don't need, that is not helpful. Is, again, too, people who haven't even been a parent or I don't know, or who they're just wanting to criticize. I'm not sure. But either way, I'm it is really, really hard to, just from me being a personal, me being a parent, to hear all the criticism and be oh gosh, I do that. Or I've done that.
Yes.
And not feel weary and not feel well, my husband always says, where we succeed, other people will fail. And where we fail, other people will succeed. And that's just, and they'll let us know when they're 35. But either way, I think that's what I want to tell weary parents is just you're doing the best you can. And I truly believe for the most part that parents truly are and it's the hardest thing to do is, to pour into teens, to pour into kids. That's what I would say.
It's great.
And real quick, I'll just add to that. One of the things I tell parents all the time is when I have both the husband and the wife in the room, is I say, let's try and eliminate the words right and wrong from our parenting because I think both your motives are right. Let's talk about what's effective and ineffective. So one of the last things I would say to parents at home listening to this is your motives probably are right. They probably are good. They probably are pure. But if something's ineffective, it can be right and ineffective, right? And so I would just give the encouragement to you guys of just trying to start use that verbiage of effective or ineffective, what works, doesn't work, not right or wrong, because we'll get defensive, right? If my wife were to say, what you did was wrong, I'd be but, right? I'd get defensive because I love my kids. And so, I think that's a big part of it too, is saying you're sorry, to your kids, and then just, having correct expectations, and even in your verbiage of your parenting.
It's so good. Y'all, such a great conversation.
Yes, it is. We don't want it to end, but to be respectful of your time, you have appointments. We're going to ask you one last question that is fun and food related. So, two-parter. Queso or guac is part one. And what's your favorite taco?
Nice.
Guac all the way.
Guac all
me.
the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably fish tacos if I had to choose.
Mm-hmm. Good choice.
All right, so I'm going to tell you something that nobody knows about me.
Oh.
I don't even know if my wife knows this about me, and I've been married 23 years. I have never tasted guac.
Really?
Never.
David.
Wow.
Never tasted guac.
That's
Something about the
fascinating.
green and the texture just creeps me out.
Okay.
Have
So
you
I've
had
so-
an avocado?
No, not in my
Wow.
life. Not in 50 years of being on this earth.
Wow.
So I'm a queso guy,
You're a
obviously.
queso
And I
guy.
would be Satco all the way.
Yeah.
Satco, they call them fajitas, but they're soft tacos, and they are just
So good.
heaven in your mouth. So
They're
yes.
so good.
So I would be Satco and queso all the way.
I think we're going to have a staff meeting where we
Make me eat.
Make you eat
Tender
guacamole.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hey.
I don't know if you'll be able to do it.
We may.
Aw. Y'all, thank you for sitting down with us.
So good to be
Sharing
with
so
you
much
too.
wisdom.
Anytime.
We love
You guys
y'all.
are our favorite people.
Yes. So
Love you
much.
guys.
Thanks for trusting
Oh.
us, too.
Yeah.
We sure do.
We do.
David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager,
Chris Starrett, our engineer.
our management team at H Squared.
We are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.